Hello, welcome back to Global. I am Tim Wilcox. Now, does a traditional education, learning facts and concepts and applying them to new challenges, kill creativity? How important is creativity for success? For years, the old model, a good education followed by a solid career, was a sign of success. Now, though, many parents and educators believe creativity in education will fuel the economies of the future and also make us happier. Well, joining us from our Cambridge studio is Pam Bernard, reader in education at the University of Cambridge. With me in the studio, Sir Ken Robinson, author of The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything, and also an education advisor. So Ken, if I can just start with you. Creativity and a traditional education, they go together, don't they?
Absolutely they do, yes. I'm not arguing against that. I mean, creativity is the process of having new ideas, and it's as relevant in science, in mathematics, in English as it is in dance and music and theatre. It's the fundamental heartbeat, really, of a successful economy and of a great community. So there's no doubt about its importance.
So all of these things predicated on an ability to write, an ability to communicate, an ability to be numerate.
Absolutely. There's no conflict between these two things. You can't be... I mean, a friend of mine won the Nobel Prize for chemistry, and that's for originality, but he had to know an awful lot of chemistry. You then have to talk about how you help people to become more creative. Part of my concern is that the current approaches that are being promoted, particularly in America and Europe, to education are discouraging original thinking.
We'll just open that up for a bit before we go to Pamela. In what way are they stifling creativity?
Well, in two ways, really. One is that in a number of countries, I think including this one, the curriculum is becoming narrower, partly through the pressure of standardised testing. And also standardised testing in itself sometimes can have that effect, because it tends to limit the discretion of teachers. And there's no doubt about the economic argument. There was a report recently by IBM. They looked at 1,500 CEOs in 80 countries. They all said that creativity is their top priority. So to me, the argument is not whether we should, it's how we should, and that's a lot of what my work is about.
But Pamela Bernard, don't we need some sort of yardstick by which to judge pupils and then to encourage and foster and nurture creativity? So, I mean, are you at one with Sir Ken on this?
Well, yes, I agree with much of what Ken says. I'd like to add that we should be talking about creativities, because there are different kinds of creativities and it's all contextual. So, for example, my PhD students that I have here, I have PhD students from Singapore, from Taiwan, from China, from Australia, and from local regions, of course, in the UK and Europe. And each of these students come from countries and governments that are very interested, as Ken has rightly said, in creativity, and have creativity as sort of top of the policy agendas for change and for needing to address what is central to humanistic views. But of course, the issue often tends to get stymied by the other agenda, which is performativity, or in other words, tests, targets and tables. The issue of measuring comes up, measuring effectiveness, measuring what is learned.
But are curriculums or curriculi, I suppose, too narrow or not?
Yes, in a word. I think there are teachers battling a lot of the discourse in education from governments who are really, I think, struggling to know the way forward in terms of connecting education to industry, to the economy of their countries. And yet we know that there is an inextricable link between these areas, which is what Ken has been advocating. And I have a book on creative learning. I've got a book on creative teaching. I've got a third book which looks at creativities and that links with real-world practice.
Everyone's got books to sell, but but Ken, it does rely, does it not, on particularly good teachers? And are you saying that actually the teaching workforce isn't there, certainly in this country perhaps, to facilitate something like this?
I'm not saying it's not there, but I think what Pauline said is right, that there's a disconnect here, I think, between what national policymakers often say they want and what they do. They
Yes.
talk about the importance of creativity. That's certainly true here. It's true in America. President Obama's made whole speeches about innovation. But then the actual policies that are introduced in education are very standardized, very restrictive. They remove the discretion of teachers. And it's actually being made worse to some degree, I guess inadvertently, by these international league tables that are published by the OECD in Paris that confirm, that compare performance in reading and math and to some degree science. Ministers of education around the world are jockeying to see who's going to be at the top of the list. I was saying recently, I think these things have become like the Eurovision Song Contest of education these days, and it's not a bad comparison in a way, because we all know how good the songs are in the Eurovision Song Contest. You know,
Brilliant.
Yes, exactly. So yes, that's not the best music produced in a year, but it wins the competition.
But we're running out of time, so I'm afraid it's just a final thought from you, Pamela. Just looking internationally between sort of state and private educational systems, is there that same chasm or gulf which has existed, some would argue, in the UK?
Between state and private schools, I think there is a massive gap in the will to engage directly with what creativity and creativities can be in education, often driven again by the sort of the constraints of policy, and yet those constraints don't have to be constraints. I think that professional learning communities like schools, like universities, like organisations can address from the bottom up what a creative environment and activity and agenda can mean in that context. And when people actually feel that empowerment to do it themselves from the bottom up, that's when we'll see a real sea change, rather than see pockets of excellence where excellent teachers are really working with creative learning and creative teaching methods with a community and learning as part of a creative agenda.
Very interesting. Pamela Bernard and Sir Ken Robinson, thank you both very much indeed. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to discuss this. Well, let's hear how other parts of the world view creativity and how young people feel about their prospects for the future.